I'm going to say something that might upset some people, and I'm saying it as a mom, not a critic. The most defiant toddlers I know right now are being raised by the most thoughtful, well read, gentle parenting mothers I've ever met. These are women who read the books, follow all the right accounts, and genuinely want to break generational cycles. And their 3-year-olds are running the house. Gentle parenting itself isn't the problem here. The problem is that most of us are doing a version of gentle parenting that was never actually gentle parenting to begin with. We've been sold a sanitized, Instagram friendly version that quietly deleted the one ingredient that makes the whole thing work. Stay with me because understanding this will change how you parent by the end of the week. Real gentle parenting, the version written by the actual experts who created the movement, is built on 2 pillars standing side by side. The first pillar is empathy for your child's inner experience. We validate our kids' feelings. We don't shame them for big emotions. We don't punish tantrums. And we treat our toddler as a whole person with a genuine inner life. That first pillar is the one every mom on Instagram has already absorbed into her bones. The second pillar is firm, non negotiable limits. Actual physical limits, held calmly and consistently every single time, even when your child completely falls apart about them in public. These are not suggestions your toddler can talk you out of over 15 minutes of arguing in the cereal aisle. That second pillar quietly disappeared somewhere between the original parenting books published 10 years ago and the Instagram reel you watched yesterday afternoon. What's happening in a lot of gentle parenting households right now is that the empathy pillar is trying to do all the structural work entirely on its own. A single pillar cannot ever hold up a whole house on its own. When kids sense that there's no real solid limit underneath all the validating language their mother is using, they do exactly what toddlers are biologically wired to do. They push and they push, and they keep pushing, looking for the wall that tells them they're actually safe. Imagine walking through a pitch dark room knowing there might not be any walls at all. That's essentially what a toddler feels like inside a house full of endless validation and no solid limits. The acting out you've been seeing from your kid isn't a failure of your love for her. It's a small child desperately searching for the edges of her world. Janet Lansbury has been teaching parent-toddler classes for over 20 years. She's one of the most respected voices in respectful parenting, and her book No Bad Kids is essentially required reading in this whole world. She recently wrote a chapter that shook me when I read it at my kitchen table. In that chapter, she took direct aim at 3 pieces of advice that have spread all over social media under the gentle parenting banner. She said very plainly that these 3 specific ideas are producing miserable parents and insecure children across the country. The first one you've definitely heard already. Only set limits with your children for actual physical safety reasons. You've heard this exact phrasing on at least one parenting account. It sounds so wise and enlightened and respectful toward your child. But think about what it actually means in practice. It means your toddler can unfold all the laundry you just spent 30 minutes folding. And if she isn't in physical danger, you're supposed to just let her do it. It means your 5-year-old can demand to be carried all the way home even though your back is killing you. And setting a limit would somehow be wrong because it's not technically a safety issue. Lansbury's response to this one is brutal. She calls it a formula for insecure children and miserable parents. This isn't gentle parenting in any meaningful sense of the word. This is parental self-erasure dressed up in soft therapeutic language. The second piece of advice sounds even more virtuous than the first. Don't ever set limits that might feel like punishments to your children. Think through what this really means on a normal Tuesday afternoon. You start questioning yourself every single time your kid cries about any limit at all. Is this particular limit a punishment in disguise? Should I probably just remove the limit entirely? Am I being too mean right now? Am I somehow ruining her childhood? The mom stuck in this mental loop is parenting from deep hesitancy instead of grounded strength. Toddlers can smell parental hesitancy the way sharks can smell blood in the water. They don't calm down when they detect it. They push even harder, because a hesitant parent is actually a very scary parent to a toddler. It means nobody is actually in charge of the whole ship. The third piece of advice is probably the most exhausting one on the list. When your children push against your limits, make them laugh about it instead. Turn hitting into a silly tickle game. Turn biting into some ridiculous song you make up on the spot. Convert your own genuine annoyance into a performance of delight for your child. Lansbury isn't subtle about this one either. She points out it's absurd to ask an already exhausted mother to become a Broadway performer every single time her kid acts out. The deeper problem is that this approach teaches kids their behavior has no real consequence, and it teaches mothers to suppress their honest emotional responses. We end up modeling fakeness while supposedly teaching authenticity. All 3 ideas share the same hidden assumption. Any limit your child resists must be inherently a little bit violent toward her. A toddler's distress in any moment must always be evidence that you personally did something wrong. The true measure of a good mother must be a happy kid in every single given moment of the day. None of that is actually true in the real world of raising small children. And the original gentle parenting theorists who started this whole movement never believed any of it. Now we get to the part where things get genuinely surprising, and where most mothers I talk to have a real light bulb moment about their own kids at home. Toddlers don't just tolerate firm limits from their parents, they actively need those limits in their daily lives. Not in the abstract developmental psychology way you might have read about online somewhere. I mean, they physically relax their tiny bodies when a limit gets held firmly by their parent. You've probably already seen this happen in your own house without knowing what you were looking at. Picture a 2-year-old who's been whining and pushing and demanding things for the past full hour of your morning. The mom finally says, calmly and clearly from the kitchen, no more snacks until dinner. She stays completely put when the kid loudly protests. There's a big storm of crying that follows. And then, often within just a few short minutes, the kid actually sighs a deep sigh, curls herself into the couch cushions, and plays quietly for the next 20 minutes. That deep sigh is the sound of a small nervous system finally getting exactly what it needed from its caregiver. Kids this young don't yet have the internal brakes they need to regulate their own strong impulses from moment to moment. Their developmental job in this whole season is to push against the world around them. Our parental job is to be the solid container holding them safely inside. When the container is solid and predictable every day, they can bounce off the walls knowing they won't fall out into empty space. When the container is wobbly and constantly negotiable, they push harder and harder every day, trying to find something stable to crash into. The biggest irony of overly permissive gentle parenting is that it produces the exact anxiety and defiance it was originally trying so hard to prevent. A kid growing up without firm limits at home is a kid whose nervous system is constantly on high alert every day, scanning the environment for danger, completely unable to settle. That's exactly why these kids often don't sleep well at night, why they cling so intensely to their mothers at every drop off, and why they routinely melt down over absolutely nothing at all. These kids aren't being difficult on purpose to torture their mothers. They're drowning inside their own unregulated nervous systems, and the parenting content we've been watching told us to meet that drowning with more validation. Lansbury wrote something else in that same book that actually made me close it and sit on my kitchen floor for a full minute. She said we're currently in the middle of a yelling epidemic among thoughtful, educated, gentle parenting oriented mothers all across the country. She noted that some people are even calling it the new spanking. These mothers aren't yelling because they secretly don't care about their children. They're yelling because they've been trying so incredibly hard to be gentle for so many thousands of exhausting hours over so many consecutive days that the accumulated pressure finally breaks through in a completely uncontrolled way one morning. They did everything the gentle parenting playbook told them to do. They stopped punishing, stopped controlling, stopped saying no, stopped being authoritative in any way at all. And their toddler's behavior just kept getting worse and worse over the months. They felt like they were losing every single interaction with their own kid. Then one regular morning, over something tiny like a spilled cup of milk at breakfast, they absolutely lost their temper in front of everyone. If you've ever been that exact mom standing in that kitchen at breakfast, I want you to really hear this next part clearly. You are not a bad parent to your children. You are actually a genuinely good parent who was handed a broken version of the instruction manual. The real reason you finally snapped isn't that you failed at gentle parenting. You actually succeeded brilliantly and exhaustingly at the wrong version of gentle parenting. That particular version quietly stripped out your basic right to set limits in your own home, convinced you that your kid's distress was always your personal failure as her mother, and slowly made you question every single no until the word no practically disappeared from your vocabulary entirely. Of course, you eventually snapped under all that pressure. Any human being with a functioning nervous system would have snapped under those exact conditions for that long. A mother simply cannot hold up an entire family structure from just one pillar alone. This isn't a moral failing on your part as a parent. This is basic structural physics playing out in your kitchen. So what does it actually look like in practice when both pillars are standing up at the same time? A real gentle parenting moment has 3 essential parts, and all 3 of them have to be present together for it to actually work. There's the firm limit itself, there's the empathic validation of her feelings, and there's the parent staying calm and regulated in the emotional storm that the limit creates in the child. It sounds something like this on a normal Tuesday at 5:30 when your 3-year-old wants candy right before dinner. I know you really want that candy right now. It looks so good to you. And we're not having candy before dinner tonight, sweetheart. I'm going to put it back on the shelf now. Then your kid, predictably and loudly, completely loses her entire mind about it. Most gentle parenting content online goes silent on what happens next. But what happens next is everything. You don't take the limit back after the crying starts. You don't negotiate with her about it for 10 minutes straight. And you don't launch into a long explanation about why dinner is important for her growing body. Instead, you stay right there, calm and warm, and present with her, letting her have all her big feelings about the limit without ever actually changing the limit itself. You might say to her gently, "You're so disappointed about the candy. It's okay to be upset about this. I'm right here with you." But the shelf remains exactly the shelf where it was. The candy stays up there where you put it. Your body language is deeply relaxed, but also completely immovable in its stance. You are a solid tree in the middle of her emotional storm, not a loose leaf blowing around in it. This is exactly what the actual experts describe in their real books. Dr. Becky Kennedy, whose Good Inside is probably the most popular gentle parenting book of the last decade, writes almost defensively about this in the opening pages of her own book. She says there's nothing about her parenting style that is permissive or fragile, and that her approach actively promotes firm boundaries, parental authority, and sturdy leadership. Every single major gentle parenting expert you can name has written similar chapters defending themselves against the accusation of being permissive. They've always included the firm limits part of the framework from the very beginning. Somewhere between their original books and your social media feed today, that critical part got quietly deleted along the way, because firm limits just don't make for pretty Instagram carousel graphics. If you've been quietly feeling like a failure of a mother throughout this entire video, I want to offer you a totally different reframe of what's been happening to you. You haven't actually been failing at anything at all. You've just been running a version of the operating system that was missing about half the code it needed to function. The most defiant toddlers I mentioned at the very start of this video aren't being raised by bad moms somewhere out there. They're being raised by some of the best intentioned, most emotionally attuned mothers of this entire generation of parents. Mothers who did more reading about child development in their first year of parenting than their own mothers ever did across entire decades of raising kids. But great intentions combined with a broken blueprint still produce a house that won't actually stand up in a real storm. The fix for this isn't to swing all the way back to the parenting our own mothers did in the 80s, with all the shame and the spanking and the because I said so authoritarianism of that era. You were absolutely right to want something genuinely different for your own children. The real fix is to go back and pick up the pillar you didn't know was missing from the framework. Firm limits held calmly in your body, with empathy for the big feelings that come up in response to them. That right there is the whole complete thing. That approach is what gentle parenting always actually was in the first place. You are 100% allowed to say no to your toddler, allowed to actually mean it when you say it out loud, and allowed to stay inside that no even when your kid completely falls apart about the limit you set. Your toddler will not break under the weight of a single no. In fact, she'll probably exhale deeply for the first time in months of her young life. Go try holding one firm limit this week with your toddler. Just one single limit is all I'm asking from you. Hold that one limit all the way through to the end, even when she melts down completely. Then come back and tell me in the comments exactly what happened afterward.